watch is $65 to $80 a barrel WTI. And currently 90, with futures at 85 in 2016. With 85 in 2016 is just essentially the discount rate. Right? So that they're still really predicting that it's going to be about 90 bucks in 2016. And then the $65 to $80 a barrel is when they have to start shutting down the production in these fields. So about $65 is what it costs them to get the oil and whatever they're getting out of the rigs, out of the wells in Eagle Ford. Right? And then you have to pay to transport. Right? And then it's the same story for North Dakota and Barnett in Pennsylvania. Right? Except for right now it costs a lot more to transport your oil from North Dakota because North Dakota is in the middle of nowhere. Right? And a lot more to just transport your oil from western Pennsylvania and the upper Midwest there around Ohio just because they don't have the infrastructure. Right? They need to go east, and they haven't been used to going east from that direction. For the natural gas, we need $5 million per BTU is the rough prediction of when new rigs will start searching for natural gas. Right now it's $4 with the futures at $4. And then we're going to see, I'm going to mention later, right, all this upstream is taking in the natural gas and the condensate, which I'm going to expect to drive up the price, which is why we have to worry about the development in upstream. Right? But if it does drive up the price of natural gas, then we'll see the upstream market start to kick back in. All right, so the end of '86. In 86, we had the oil glut, which was Saudi Arabia, the Soviet Union, and North Sea oil coming back online. Right, which is something, as far as I can tell from the actual data I had, right, something completely external to the market. Right? The prices were relatively flat, nobody saw it coming, and then prices just dropped off, which makes me think that it was really mostly Saudi Arabia who started producing more oil in '86. And so then again, I'm here to tell you today that I don't see anything like that, but the Economist in '85 didn't see anything like that at all, right? Except for the founder of my organization, and then they tried, when he called it, he tried to hound out of the university, and it turned out to be right, and now there's an Institute for Regional Forecasting. But anyway. So we have all these other concerns, right? The United States growth, so we've been doing relatively well, right? But only compared to the rest of the world. Normally in any other recovery from a recession, people would be calling the United States recovery rather anemic, right? But we compare ourselves to Europe and we look like jackrabbits, right? And then if you can look at the world as a whole too, right? The recovery has been rather anemic. But everybody is growing, normally, so like the financial recession was timed by the spike in oil prices. Right? The financial recession was going to happen anyway. Too many people buying too many houses that they couldn't afford. Right? And all the other stuff that was going on in those markets. But the spike in oil prices probably moved forward when the financial recession was coming back. Well, our oil prices have been high for 3 years. So that the growth that we have is premised on high oil prices, so we don't have to worry about that. But we could be anything. Right? The one thing I've been worried about, right, is collapse in China's growth rate, right? Or China and India, right? Because that's basically where the whole boom from starting in 2003 came from. Right? Probably about 1 billion people have gone from agrarian lifestyle to a middle class, what we would recognize as a middle class lifestyle in 20 years. Right? So the greatest advancement in material well-being in human economy forever. Right? But a lot of economists, including me, have been calling for China's crash for the last 15 years. And eventually we're going to be right. So if we go back to '86 though, right, it was the outside oil that really caused the glut and put the final nail in the coffin. And so a lot of people are worried, right? Once our oil boom is predicated on this shale, right? And they have shale everywhere, all across the world. But the cost structure in all of these most foreign countries, most non-American countries, is much higher. So there's a report on China that came out the other day. They're looking for natural gas, because their natural gas rates are like 4 times what ours are. And they were claiming that the cost for the rigs was 2 to 3 times what it was to develop here in the United States, to produce natural gas here in the United States. And so, and there's right, and you know, there's little environmental regulations that we have to deal with in Texas. I'm sure the oil companies would love China even more. And so, right, and this is true throughout the world. Most of the other places that have the international shale or have shale also have much higher costs than we do. Middle East, right, we could see more output come from the Middle East in general. If the Israelis and the Arabs and North Africans and ISIS all decide that they would be better off, you know, not fighting and killing each other, which unfortunately doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. The Saudis still have some excess capacity, so they could do it, they could. But basically, the Saudis, when they did it in '86, it's because they were upset with the rest of OPEC, right? And they wanted to teach them a lesson, and even though they pretty much doubled their output, their revenues fell in half. Another thing we're going to have to worry about a little bit in upstream is environmental regulations. There's some are coming on the line right now in North Dakota, where they can't burn the methane anymore. Right now, methane is not economical to transport from North Dakota down to anywhere that can process it, and so they're just burning. Jesse Thompson at the Fed told me it was somewhere around 30 to 40% of the methane is just going up in the air because it's not worth trying to transport. And so the North Dakota government has put in new regulations that's not going to let them do that. So it's going to make it more costly to produce oil up there. But, you know, there's a widespread movement to do something about fracking because everybody's scared of it and nobody really understands what it is outside of the oil industry. I don't really understand what it is. And so that we could see some things like that. You know, and then the EPA is always threatening the Houston area with all kinds of stuff, which is just going to become even worse when we build the 30 or 40 new plants that we're about to build. All right. And so we've already seen this slide, and this is just reiterates that midstream growth is predicated on all of these new fields, plus the new oil that's coming out of some of our older fields. And so that, you know, West Pennsylvania and the Permian Basin have pretty much existed forever. Okay? But now that we're getting additional capacity, they're still having to build new pipelines. And unfortunately, it's really, really hard to try to find any kind of comprehensive data on the pipelines that are being built, how much is being spent, where the pipelines are going, and where they're coming from. Right? I managed, there's lots of projects, and so I could find them I could find some one at a time after just randomly searching for pipelines. So it took a while. But here, one of the ways right now that they're transporting oil is they're using rail terminals. And so that you can see along these same areas where we see all of these new yellow dots, right, and the blue dots, are where they've been building the rail terminal. The rail terminal is a very short-term response. You can build it, $50 million, you get it up in a year, right? As opposed to $50 million for every 10 miles or 15 or 20 miles of pipeline and 2 or 3 years of construction, right? And so it's low cost, you can put it up quickly. And so an unproven field for marginal capacity, you're going to build a rail terminal. And then the other advantage for these companies is when you put it on a rail line, so whenever they finish most of these pipelines, if you're in North Dakota and you put your oil in the pipeline is coming, you put your oil on a tanker car instead, you can look at the market prices in Houston and Louisiana and Eastern Seaboard and Eastern Canada and Western Canada and decide where to put it. That's the other advantage for putting it on the rail line. But roughly where all of these are being built, whenever you see these clusters, are the clusters between which we're building our pipelines. And so here's one of the pipelines that was interesting enough to go ahead and include it on its own. And so what we can see what's going to come up again. So they started working on these pipelines back in 2012. Right, so they built 70 miles of new pipeline and 113 conversion from a natural gas pipeline. This is Kinder Morgan crude and condensate pipeline, and it was completed in 2012. Double Eagle was a different company. I forget what the actual name of the company is, but it's been bought or they're partnered with Kinder Morgan now. And they built 140 miles of pipeline in 2013. And this is collect the oil and gas and condensate that's coming out of the Eagle Ford and send it down to Corpus, and then for Kinder Morgan pipeline to send it to Houston. And then since that construction has been finished, the initial construction, we've built a bunch of tiny 30 miles to 15 miles, 10-mile connections and gathering facilities and what do you call that? Which one goes to? Extension. So this is Phillips 66 down in Sweeney, which is just on the border between Brazoria County and Matagorda. I think if you take 36 out of town and you follow the coastline, you'll go right by. Right? And so there's a lot of upfront cost here, which is going to make matter. Right? And then you end up adding on these additional little parts to extend your pipeline. And so the pipelines are the high upfront cost, low operating cost. Right? They're going to go to a proven high output field, and they're going to have or proximity to the market or other pipelines. And the rail terminals are low upfront cost, high operating cost, unproven low output fields as a stopgap or marginal method, or it allows the cheap producers. All right. So between 2012 and 2013, right, we jumped up. We increased our production, our investment in midstream. Right, and this is actually, I think, just pipeline by 4 times, from about $10 billion to about $40 billion. Okay, so I got this graph here. And then between 2013 and 2014, we cut it in half. Which still means that for our crude and product pipelines, we're still investing 3 times as much this year as we did in 2012 for crude and product pipelines, and we're still investing about the same amount as we did in 2012 for our natural gas pipelines. But essentially the boom in the midstream appears to have already peaked for 1 year in 2013. Right, we increased by 4 times, and then we've already fallen by half since then. Right? And so then these people like Kinder Morgan and Enterprise, and I used to know more of their names, right? They're building these pipelines and then they're running them out of Houston. And so this is where their increased demand for their office space is coming from. And this is where, right, the people who are constructing these pipelines are competing with y'all for labor, right? And sending us to North Dakota. Right, and this is also increasing our manufacturing because there's a lot of our pipe manufacturing and our specialty equipment manufacturers. Right? But this looks like it's already peaked, even though it's still, right, we're still at a high level of investment compared to where we were before this. So, but as it continues to fall off, we would expect to see a lower rate of growth for both office space, other midstream companies, and for manufacturing warehouse distribution space by the companies that are building these pipelines, wherever they are. So the downstream has been driven by the boom in downstream construction, so the increase in our construction of plants and chemical plants and refineries and other things, right, has been driven by primarily this increase in the natural gas. So the dry natural gas is methane, wet natural gas is typically propane, butane, ethane. And remember, this is even though our rigs collapsed, right? The rigs that were looking for natural gas has collapsed. And this is primarily because even when we go out there looking for oil in the shale, we're getting a lot of natural gas also. And so that this increase in production of rigs, right, and for rigs and our natural gas liquids and our least condensate, which is our super light petroleum, is what is has driven down the prices of all of these things. And so that the refineries and the chemical plant and all of our petrochemical complex wants to try to capture these historically low prices that are associated with this increase in production for light petroleum, right, in order to capture super profits. But everybody's doing that, and so everybody's building their plants now, trying to be the first one, right, to finish, right, and so that they get 3 months of operation where they're able to capture ridiculous margins, right, before everybody else comes online, and it becomes a commodity product. It already is a commodity product, right? But maybe a commodity budget, and then nobody is really earning any more interest than general 4 or 5, 6%, whatever. So the Center for Energy Economics at the University of Texas, right, who tried to compile, start getting data. It's very difficult to find anywhere where people have compiled this data on all the construction that's going on in the Houston economy. And so this is actually gas intensive only, so natural gas primarily, and across the U.S., where we had $83 billion in investment to complete it or to be completed by 2020. And so this is going to become pretty easier in this sector. So ethylene crackers, most of which are being produced in the Gulf Coast, a lot of which are in the Houston metropolitan region. You take ethane and propane, make ethylene and propylene, to make plastics. Some chemistry in there between. We have 6 methanol plants, which is taking natural gas to make a whole bunch of different projects. We have 5 proposed gas to liquids, right? Where you take natural gas and somehow you convert it into diesel and gasoline and the liquid products that we're used to in other fuel oils. And so here, right? So these are 5 proposed, none of which are currently under construction. Shell had one that they were going to build up in Louisiana somewhere, which they've now canceled. And for a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about as to why that changed worries. Missouri County actually did compile their list of everything that was going to be built there as of March of this year. Okay. And so all of these are generally natural gas or light liquids associated, except for we have one steel plant. And the key here is the $27 billion announced as being invested, 18,700 temporary jobs, 3,200 permanent jobs, which makes a difference between 15,000 jobs.